You're listening to episode 753 of a Very Spatial podcast, January 12th, 2025.
Hello and welcome to our Very Spatial podcast. I'm Jesse.
I'm Sue.
I'm Barb.
And this is Frank.
And this week we're going to be talking about something. But first, some news.
First up in the news, some good news for remote sensing. The Sentinel-2C, so that's the third satellite in the Sentinel-2 series of the Copernicus broader mission, has been commissioned. So it launched back in September. And of course, after satellites launch, they have to go through a series of tests, calibrations for the instruments and all those kinds of things. So that is now complete. In fact, I think there's a sample data set already available. So the Sentinel series, so you had Sentinel-2A, which launched back in 2015, I think it was, Sentinel-2B a couple years later. These are satellites that give us information for essentially land use, environmental monitoring. So I think the Sentinel-2 have 13 spectral bands. So those are the bands, lengths of light. And 4 of those are at 10 meters. They have a couple other bands that do some other things. But essentially, that's the visible and near infrared for those of us that work in remote sensing area. But this is another good resource in the Sentinel-2 series, which are really valuable. So good news that it's online and giving us data.
2C is up. That allows 2A to become kind of a backup, if you will. So it should be flipping over to B and C being the primary two.
Yeah, because you think about it, 2015, so that's 10 years. 10 years this year.
Also, in imagery-like news, those of you who are drone operators, SUAS operators in North Carolina, have less restrictions. So if you were operating for commercial or government use in North Carolina, up until December 1st, you were required to have a North Carolina license. So you had to pass the North Carolina test, which was an online test, very straightforward. It covered the same things that the Part 107 test covered, but with just a little bit of extra information about some of the privacy and data limitations that were specific to North Carolina. Basically, you couldn't use thermal for certain uses. That was basically the other question. But now, as of December 1st, 2024, that is no longer required. And so if you are doing commercial government flights, you just have to have the Part 107.
That's pretty cool, but also, considering do you see the pictures of the firefighting plane in California that got hit by a private drone?
I did.
Yeah. And so things like that, it's always going to be that push and pull, right? Between, freedom to allow people to do things without too much oversight, but at the same time, safety, security. Now, admittedly, that would fall under the whole, national regulation side of things. But still, that news is coming out this week also makes you go, but I get why you don't, just let people do whatever they're going to do.
Yeah. No, it's part of 107, and even I just forgot the other name, the acronym for the name that private flyers can do that aren't doing it for commercial. But everybody has to pass a test if you're flying anything over 250 grams. And it's part of both of those tests that if there is manned aircraft in the area, you are not to fly.
Mm-hmm.
So everybody should know that. And there's emergency services things that are part of Part 107 as well. Other things. We can just go through this, but it's, you can talk about the smoke essentially being the same as clouds, and you're supposed to be X distance from any cloud whenever you're flying. And yeah, so yes, that would fall into that. But in North Carolina, this opens up flight to a little bit. Again, it wasn't a large hurdle to get over by any means if you were flying in North Carolina before. So,
Was there a cost associated with taking the test in North Carolina? Do you know?
no, it was free.
So the U.S. Navy Surface Fleet is training on GPS alternatives in case of a GPS denial situation. They are saying that anyone who is on the ocean should be training to operate without GPS. And it feels to me like it was only last year we were talking about a lot of the different fleets getting rid of paper maps and plotters. But because of the increasing probability of not having GPS for navigation, they are training in ways to adapt. And they feel that everyone should be aware of the history of navigation and different ways that have been used for navigation.
One thing, not in this article, but recent in December and such, is a push for conversations about quantum navigation. So that's one of the many different technologies besides the replacement ELORAN and others that are already being put into place. A portion of the U.S. fleet, I think, is beginning this month or beginning in December, we're starting to test quantum navigation technologies as well. So we are looking at other technologies for when GPS is jammed. But yeah, just being able to read a map is the important part too.
Yeah. I mean, because honestly, for anything, we've talked about this for many, many times on the podcast. You just cannot guarantee that that service will be there. So.
And really, for navigation purposes on the oceans, which is the primary concern of the Navy, there's a lot of techniques that are very old and very effective for getting from point A to point B. So, we've come to rely upon the high accuracy, and certainly if you're doing something like missile launches, you need that. But just getting to where you're going, there's other ways you can do it. And it's always best to have a backup to a backup to a backup.
Continue with the news. Some kind of an exciting milestone. Landsat has added their 12 millionth, and probably more just in the last couple of days, 12 millionth image to their collection 2 level 1 archive. So if you don't know too much about Landsat, they are kind of regularly overhauling things and stuff like that. So collection 2 is the most recent kind of grouping of stuff. And so 12 million images, though, and the 12 millionth image was one of the southern part of the United States kind of desert landscape. I think it includes the Colorado River and some other stuff. But I wanted to just put it in the news because I think this is just, again, an amazing achievement, amazing resource of decades of data collection for science, and the things that have been done with Landsat images have just been so amazing in understanding the world. So I just think it's kind of a really cool little milestone that happened this past week. So I think it was January 13th, 14th, they put the press release out. So anyway, if you haven't yet and you potentially have remote sensing needs, definitely check out Landsat. If you're a veteran Landsat user, the archive just keeps growing. Of course, now collection 2 includes Landsat 1 to 9. And of course, Landsat Next is in the planning, and hopefully that process goes smoothly to get that one launched in the near future. So yeah, just amazing. I'm always just in awe of the success of the Landsat mission.
Yeah, I think it's supposed to be 2029 or 2030 for the next launch, I think is the schedule.
Which, oh my God, it's only like 5 years away.
It is.
Which, for the census people, it's only 5 years away. Yeah. But that's a separate issue. The thing I think is interesting about this is this was in a news section they have on the Aris Data Center called Image of the Week. 12 millionth image. You could do image of the day, guys. I'm just saying.
I was going to say something that I've always appreciated that's small, but I've actually talked about it in classes when we look at some of the imagery that comes out, is the written text that they'll use to describe what's in it is so well written and just so tight and descriptive. And we know in geospatial and geography, that's a skill that we learn. It's something you have to do, but I don't think enough people outside that realize how much it takes to come up with those descriptions. And they're just really beautiful.
Yeah, and I mean, it's an example of just the end-to-end quality and just dedication that goes into creating this amazing data set of our changing Earth, really. And, kind of maybe a little corny, but I'm just amazed always by it.
So 12 million images, 8 satellites, because of course we didn't have Landsat 6, 52 and a half years-ish, roughly.
Yeah, pour one out for poor 6. Ended up in the Pacific Ocean.
Yeah. But you know what I'm thinking? If someone has a birthday party and, you could give them a Landsat image from the day they were born.
Basically, if you were born after July 23rd, 1972, there's an image for the day you were born.
Somewhere around, because it's what is it, 21-day revisit?
Well, it may not
16?
be where you were, but there is an image.
Yes, there's an image for every
whether
day.
There's clouds or not.
Yeah. So.
Like I said, and there is an image for the day you were born. Not necessarily. Yeah.
Not I was going to get the best one, but
maybe that's it. A random image from the day you were born. Yeah. There's probably a website that does that.
And that's it for the news.
So, in watching CES this year, so if you're not familiar with that, it's a Consumer Electronics Show. I got to thinking on the latest round of something we've talked about multiple times over the podcast over the years, and sometimes it was in our prognostications, right, our hopes and dreams for the future, that this area of geospatial technology and just tech in general would make that leap into the thing everyone wants, and that is sort of the VR AR thing, right? So we've talked about it tons of times, but here's kind of why I wanted to revisit it again. Is we started watching a video that actually predated CES for Android XR. So if you're not familiar, you could check that. But anyway, this new operating system. So Google's going to try to get into space again, or back into the space, or become more prominent. And it just made me want to, revisit it with all of us and just say, where do you think we're at with that? Have you given up on it? Are you trying more things in the XR, VR, AR space? Should we still dream of it? Because, of course, a core part of what was demonstrated in Android XR is the idea of using it for navigation. So deploying it on devices where you can, integrate with Google Maps and see immersive environments and historic places, all that kind of thing. So things that we've talked about with previous iterations. And once again, the dream is there, maybe rekindled a little bit, which is why I wanted to chat just for a few minutes today. But what do you guys think? Have you given up on it? Have you seen some things that maybe say, hey, I might give it a try, or what are you thinking?
I'm definitely more on the given up side. I kind of feel like this is a little bit like, I was trying to think of a good analogy, and I'm a bit failing here, but a little bit like, LiDAR on phones. I think it's going to be one of those things that is evolves and happens, and it's just sort of like, pardon the pardon the phrase, but augments the overall experience and not really a thing in its own right. I just feel like it's kind of something. It's a infrastructural technology that has to underpin something else to have any real utility.
Hey now, don't dream it's over. Hey now, when the world comes in, they come, but they won't build walls between us, because we'll have XR and VR where we can actually interact between them, right? This is
Maybe.
where we're building to.
Maybe. I mean, we're still doing the bits and pieces too. The other thing I thought is I'm breaking down and getting into the meta frames world, which I tried previously
wearables.
with Amazon and
yes, wearables. I think
yes,
is key
wearable,
here.
right? So I think that these are all like converging again, because as things we've talked about, right, is when one piece makes a leap, there's another piece that's just holding it back, right? Just like an anchor. Because I remember I when I got it, I was super excited about the HoloLens. So not even VR headsets, some of which were cool things, but the HoloLens. But the problem is that sucker weighed so much. It literally would weigh your head down, like in relative terms, right? And also it was just, massive, because they were putting a computer on the back of your head, right? And again, they did improvements, so it's not like just necessarily slam on them, but it's just not something that when you add it to the cost that is just ever going to have broad adoption. And it didn't, right? It didn't. It was kind of a niche thing, but it was really amazing, like with the potential. It just didn't take the next step.
And so we can tie in the leap. No, not leap.
Magic Leap?
No. Is it Magic Leap? I don't know.
Well, there's one that's Leap Motion, and there's Magic Leap.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's one of those.
It changed its names like 4 times, so whatever the heck that thing ended up as.
Yeah, what the MetaQuest Pro or whatever it was called for the $1,500 one, the Apple Vision Pro, all of these are meant to be mixed reality devices, and they've had promise, but they haven't paid out yet. But if we begin talking about the broader idea of wearables, it begins to change a little bit, right? That we're not just focusing on that visual aspect, that graphicacy alone, but we begin to bring in the audio. We can use the querying capabilities. These are things that we're already using on our phone fairly regularly. So if we're moving those to other devices, whether they be watch or glasses or whatnot, it begins to change that dynamic of what this is moving towards. That it's not just mixed reality as a visual aspect, but a multisensory aspect.
Oh, I was just listening because I agree with Jesse, though. I think, and I also agree with everyone else in that I think it's around. I use it because I stumble on it when there's something else that I'm going to try, or I still use the Oculus for fun and for other things because there's so much out there to do on it. But that there's always something that holds it back, but each time we start getting these convergences, we're getting closer and closer. So I think this is, this might not be the big push, but this is going to be a significant one um, in how people are using it.
It reminds me of, like when you see the trailer for a video game, and you're like, oh, this is amazing. And when's it out? Oh, 4 years from now. Oh, shut up. Like, call me when you're like 60 days from release. Until then, just leave me alone. I don't need to see little teasers or whatever. That's what I kind of feel like a lot of this stuff is at. It's the in fairness to the technology, and is that this is always going to be an iterative. We tried this, and okay, see how this piece didn't work. Let's try to work on that, and we'll try it again. Oh yeah, but now we forgot about this piece. That's going to happen. But I don't know if it's a mark of my age or what. But I kind of like when you've got this thing is they're too half baked. They need to be a little more fully baked before they're released.
Well, a question I was just thinking too to ask, and so because again, as I was watching a few of these things, and also, by the way, in a weird way, my thoughts started swirling too. We were watching a TV show where the TV host was like being shown kind of immersed in historical scenes, and kind of like the person was walking through them, and so I just thought, these are the types of things like what it made me think, what really is the dream, right? Because we have the two different approaches, which we've talked about, multiple times over the years, right? One approach is the true VR approach, right? Where you're somewhat stationary, you might move. It's the, Ready Player One, Oasis kind of idea, right? That kind of thing. And you've got a headset or some kind of interface, but you're largely stationary, and the world essentially is coming out from your device, and you're sort of experiencing things, but you're not navigating the real world. And of course, with the XR, AR, mixed reality, whatever you call them, the sort of that end of it, it is about having the interface available to you, but you're still situated in the real world more so, right? And so there are two different ways to kind of think of it. And there are probably more, but these are two main ways I think of it. And then the question for me has been, what then is the dream for me? Like, is it part of both? Is it all one or the other? Like, at what point will I stop being maybe discouraged? Like Frank, like you're saying, and what point will I say, yep, that's one thing I'm going to try. And I'm wondering which paradigm it will be. So I don't know if you guys have kind of thought about that, if there's one way you think, will go, or both will equally flourish.
The thing about, of course, mixed reality is that it provides both, because you have that occlusion capability, but you also have the pass-through capability. So, with things like the Microsoft's HoloLens, you could use it as an augmented reality device, but you could also do virtual reality activities in it as well if you whenever it completely filled your frame of view. So it's not necessarily one or the other, I don't think.
I was thinking it's going to be mixed reality because, again, it brings in both, but I think it's going to be more driven by the market. And how it's going to go is going to depend on which market coalesces it first. And I'm thinking that's going to be between entertainment and business. And business is, things like manufacturing and places like that. And I could imagine the uses in both. In fact, I could be like, I want the use in manufacturing, even for safety and efficiency. But I could also see it being driven by entertainment because I know that's where my money's going. But it's not going to be the bulk of the money worldwide.
For me, so I was kind of looking at, sort of best of lists for CES, and one that caught my eye is the Lumos, I think, AI glasses, and they sound a little bit like the glasses that Jesse has now, but they're supposed to be coming out in the first quarter, and they got a 16 megapixel camera, and who cares? 32 gigabytes of storage, don't care. Open ear speakers, don't care. Easy adaptability for your fit and lens choices. Okay, that's important. Smarts are handled by ChatGPT, and the glasses connect over Wi-Fi or to your phone via Bluetooth. Okay, now actually I care a little bit. The rest of that stuff is cool, it's whatever, but the interesting thing to me is not going to be AR and VR as a paradigm, but as a tool set for what I really want a pair of smart glasses for, which is an assistant that's with me effectively 24/7 because I can't see without my glasses. So the second I get up in the morning, I put my glasses on and I don't take them off until either I take a shower or, I go to bed. So for me, it's interesting to be able to say, hey, Chat GPT or Siri or whoever that I've got connected to my AI, what can you tell me about this thing? And if it were to show me using augmented reality or virtual reality, that would be astounding, right? That would be like life changing. That would be the paradigm that I would want, which is I'm trying to process a thought and I need information. Can you show me what the Sistine Chapel looks like? Can you, demonstrate a thing real quick? That would be amazing. But again, the paradigm is there to support what I really want, which is the AI virtual assistant thing. So that would be the critical piece for me.
So somewhat in the way it's deployed, right? So in the glass, so because this is kind of what I'm thinking too. So there's some other devices that I've been looking at over the last 6 months, just because I'm being bombarded by them. But Even Realities is a company that has a set of glasses that are smart glasses that actually has a text display that it gets projected onto the inside screen. It's kind of interesting because they're trying to solve this, right? Is if you have the other things like seeing the Sistine Chapel, right? Like which was in the Android XR, or maybe it was a place in Florence. But anyway, is that you must have a way to have the display. But when we have the display, so to have the two things, right? To have the AI assistant, those things, which can be audio, but to have the display, we're stumbling with the device because you have to somehow block out a little bit of light potentially, but maybe not all the time because otherwise you won't take it with you. So over the last few years, I've tried like the glasses that create like a movie screen kind of style or a monitor style, but they have to be tethered because they have to be powered. But they block out lights. You can't really walk around with them, or they're, you got to carry extra things. That's the problem with the VR things. But what you're talking about, Frank, I think is kind of maybe for quite a few people like the dream, and I would go that. But if somehow the device can still be lightweight like glasses, but provide this extra stuff, I think that's the hump. And I'm starting to see some things that suggest that we could get over that hump.
Well, so two things. One, I don't think that the Lumos has projection. It's keeping track of your light, but it's not projection.
No, it doesn't have that.
Even Realities is doing that, and they're probably the one that I've seen do it the best, and it's a monochrome image that you're seeing in front of you. There's suggestions that the Meta Ray-Ban Metas are potentially going to have that this year, but again, it's not been announced. But because of the announcement of Orion, their development glasses that they're not actually going to sell, that Meta is doing, where they have waveform technology in the lenses, so you're seeing things and hearing things. And then with Snapchat, who you can actually buy their developer glasses that are kind of looking at the same thing, where they're, again, pushing out imagery into your glasses. Between those three, the one that's actually viable and the two that are more development packages, we are seeing this move forward. This was the idea that what the original Apple glasses were going to be, and we still haven't seen that. That's why I think they pushed to create the Apple Vision Pro, just so they could have something out there, even though it wasn't what everybody was expecting from an actual pair of glasses. But we are at that capability now. It's just a question of what it's going to cost, because Even Realities is $700, I think.
Six. I think it starts at $6, but and it's a company in, I think it's Denmark. So I mean, it's a little bit difficult to get, but you can.
And then you can get what are Amazon's called again? The Echo glasses. There we go.
Frames, I think.
Yeah, frames. So you can get those for $250, whatever. Same thing with the Meta Ray-Ban Metas, which are roughly $250 if you don't.
Currently,
have
those
lenses.
are no display.
Actually, I guess it's $300. And both of those are no display, but they give you that capability to talk to something. Now with the Meta, it's talking to Llama, their AI. With the Echo frames, it is not yet AI, but it is still Alexa.
It's Alexa,
driven.
so somewhat.
So, yeah, you're still able to ask questions. It's just not the same source. So those are some of the technologies that we're seeing right now that's beyond the VR portion of it. And of course, with the announcement of Android XR, the announcement that Google's working with Samsung and others as well to create these visual glass styles means that we're probably going to see something in that vein, maybe by the end of the year, but definitely by 2026, I think.
Yeah. So
So in my Star Wars steampunk dream, speaking about if we can think big, something I saw at CS that, I think I saw at CS and it was, around, was that purse robot. And I know it's not a full-blown robot, speaking of talking to something. So in my imagination, I would want any, mixed reality to speak to a little purse robot size, something small, none of this big stuff that goes out and does things that you can have it do so that you get that reach, if we're going to dream about how this would work and, give it more capability. So even more than a drone, something else.
And to give it a little bit more context besides just purse robot, it's basically a mental health caregiver type of device that there's 2 or 3 companies that had various options, but there was one that was just amazingly cute and would respond to you. So the ability, if you then could connect with it and get that feedback, it's nice to have it there kind of responding to you and giving you something to think about, like, having a care animal with you, but then actually getting it to respond like you're talking about, that just would be, definitely cool.
Yeah, that's why I'm saying if we're going to dream, and we're getting to Star Wars, universe levels of dreaming, something that small, robotic, not scary, not horror, but, useful.
But can we take a second to reflect on the stunning pace of change here? I mean, this feels a little bit like the AR VR conversation feels a little bit like when we were talking about location-based services. Is that it's not there, and then boom, it's everywhere, right? So I kind of feel like we're very much on the cusp of not maybe someday, like not too distant future in my life, this is going to be a very viable product, what we're talking about here, whether it's like little assistant thing that Barb was talking about, or projection glasses that are connected to a larger AI and sort of like a virtual assistant that give you a wealth of information. I feel like we're just on the cusp of that being possible.
and I think one of the things, because Barbie mentioned sort of when we've had these discussions in the past, one of the things we have talked about is uptake, right? That what's going to drive the success of whichever one, right? So the VHS versus Betamax or whatever will be either the killer app or the killer design or whatever it is that will give it mass appeal. And if that's in business, as you say, or something, or consumers using it for other things like entertainment and stuff, or ideally one that could do both things, then, but I do think, like what you're saying, Frank, is yes, we're almost there. Like I can imagine some of these devices, if they just could somehow, mate and have a baby, that we would have the magical device, right? So I think, so that's why I kind of just wanted to revisit it, because we've had a few times, is that my hope was dying, because I'm like, I could use my VR stuff for certain things. And, I had the Echo frames and I'm like, I can listen to tunes and talk to Alexa. But now some of the things I'm seeing again are making me think, oh, well, you know what? Maybe it can happen. It's So anyway, that's why I wanted to, as we start off the year of 2025, right, halfway to 2030, I thought it would be good to just, see what we're thinking on that.
Well, and I think you can also point out the fact that this is one of those things where with location-based services, what we saw coming wasn't necessarily what arrived. And so what we've been looking for in the past, because again, we've been embedded in this since before we started doing the podcast. We had access to a full cave. We've had access to VR headsets. We've had gloves and this and that, and a lot of immersion into this area. And so we're kind of, in some ways, actually limited by the sheer length of time we've been looking at this. It kind of drags us back from seeing what could be. And I think that the thing that's going to tip it over the edge are these mobility things that Google Lens kind of started, but it's going to be more than that. And I do think it's going to be a mixed media as opposed to just mixed reality. So it is everything except for maybe smell, because that's, as we keep coming back to any kind of VR, smell is the only thing that we don't
did you see
really
Dyson's
want.
thing?
I don't want smell. No matter what Trevor
fair
has
enough,
said.
but Dyson has an air purifier now that's like a headset, and then it looks like it goes across your face. And I was like, well, you could put a smell thing in there.
You
But-
could, yes.
Well, yeah, I mean, like, that's just it, right? That we know that we have to affect the sentence. Like, so another thing, was it at CES was, I think it was Japanese researchers have come up with a spoon that will make you think that you're tasting salt. But your food isn't salty, right? So for people who have to be on low salt diets. So that is it, right? Is the way that we can interface with the human senses. And sight has been the one we've been able to intervene with maybe the most, and sight and hearing. But the other ones, potentially. So, because I always thought too, one of the things, right, and is that always kind of separates you out, takes a step back, like in VR environments, right, is you can't feel the air around you. Like when you're doing things like thinking that you're moving or running or whatever. I mean, one of the things is resistance to the air and stuff like that. We've never been able to replicate some of that. And I thought, you know what, if you added that sense, which is essentially feel or touch or whatever, then I wondered how much closer you would get. So not that I want that on a mixed reality thing, having try to convince me that I'm walking down the sidewalk in Miami, but I'm climbing Mount Everest. Yeah, no, I'm good with not having that.
When I think about these things now with Sue, what you're saying, that I worked early on with a company that was doing things like exercise machines in space, stuff that we're planning for the future, for when we have, extended stays that, became a reality. But these are things now I'm looking, what you're talking about, I'm going, but I could see why that would be important in certain environments. That really that might be the thing that kicks that off. And the salt spoon.
And the salt spoon.
You could Google it. It was kind of interesting.
But that's it for this week's topic.
In the web corner, Ken Burns, documentarian. PBS has Ken Burns in the classroom. And one of the focuses for one of the documentaries on Leonardo da Vinci is Maps, Art, and the Environment, which looks at cartography and Leonardo da Vinci. It's really a very good, talking about the history of navigation, just a good history of what map making and the thoughts about mapping were like during Leonardo da Vinci's time. And it's a good resource.
Yeah, I mean, I will be doing digital cartography for my university students, and I'm actually thinking about applying some of this for their early exercises, where we talk about how you represent landscapes and how you view the world and how that translates into map making. So, yeah, pretty cool resource.
Sue and I will be in tandem there because I will also be teaching digital cartography this semester. So
There you go.
we can compare notes to how it turned out.
Yeah, there you go. Or if you want to compare notes early on, I'm doing a couple of different things this time, so we'll see. I'm knuckling under and doing more web stuff.
Well, obviously, given my predilections, I'm going to be primarily web stuff.
Oh yeah, but you got to have those. You got to have those principles.
Yeah, color theory is color theory, no matter what.
That is correct. That is correct.
On to the events corner. There are no events this week. You should go out and find some. You should start going back to conferences if you can afford to do so. That, of course, is a larger hurdle than it used to be as costs continue to rise for everything.
Yeah.
So, yeah, head out and check out conferences. If you'd like us to add your event to the podcast, send us an email to podcast@veryspatial.com.
If you'd like to reach us individually, I can be reached at Sue@veryspatial.com.
I'm Barb at VerySpatial.com.
You can reach me at Frank@veryspatial.com.
And I am available at Kinda Spatial. And, of course, if you'd like to find all of our contact information, head over to veryspatial.com/contacts.
As always,
We're the folks from Very Spatial.
Thanks for listening.
And I'll see you in a couple weeks.
Stars Saturday morn over the hills of green. I remember bright candy corn, sugar ran through the streets, and the way you touched